For any founder, letting go things it's always going to be difficult. It's like your own baby. You build it from scratch. We started as a two-man team. We did everything ourselves. And till today, I think if you need me to still do any part of the business, I think we could still do it. As the company grew, my role also changed. The part that I think hard to let go is the joy of closing an order is always there. So sometimes I still follow my sales team out. But I think generally you are the captain of the ship and you have to align everyone. So it's my duty to bring people back on course when I see them off course, and to call them out when there are issues.
Entrepreneurship can be high stakes and come with challenges that few can imagine. At the same time, no two entrepreneurs go through the same highs and lows. That's why I'm always thrilled when I get to speak to entrepreneurs on our Building Series podcast, hearing their stories and understanding their business building game plan. In this episode of the Building Series, we have Eric Leong, co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Malayan Corporation. Founded in 2011, Malayan is a foundation steel supplier focusing on waterfront and underground construction projects. Eric has grown Malayan into a regional player over the years, expanding into Southeast Asia, China, and even the Middle East. Today, 90% of its revenue come from its international markets. So welcome to the podcast, Eric. Very excited to have you on. But before we dive into the conversation, I want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor for this season of the Building Series, OCBC. As Asia's best SME bank, OCBC has been supporting SMEs across the region and along their business milestones, getting them ready from day one, keeping their businesses steady with award-winning solutions, and helping them realize their growth ambitions. All right, Eric, let's get into it. Okay, so I want to start with the start of your journey. I might be biased here, but I think, not many aspiring entrepreneurs are lining up to enter the steel or metals industry. What inspired you to enter this space, and start up the steels product company back in 2011?
Thanks, Dinesh, and thank you for having me on the show. In the last 10 years, there hasn't been more than maybe 2 or 3 new steel companies that's been set up in Singapore. So it's really not an industry that I would say a lot of people will aspire to get into. I think when I graduated, I studied engineering, and when I graduated, most of my friends and in the cohort will all want to go into banks and into tech companies. So going into steel was something that was, I would say, quite not the path that most people would have taken. But I think for me, what I saw was that, the steel industry is, although many would call a sunset industry, was primed for a lot of change. Okay. And back then, at the end of 2008 financial crisis, we were starting to see that a lot of steel mills in Asia were very inward looking. They were not really looking outwards to markets in Southeast Asia and beyond. And we saw that there was a good opportunity that there would be, a vast amount of, potential in the market in Asia in terms of infrastructure to come over, in the next couple of years. So therefore, for me, I looked at it, I said, if I don't try, who will, right? A lot of people actually told me not to go into this industry, that, you're going to be faced with a lot of giants, people who have 30, 40 years industry knowledge, what do you have, to bring against them? But I think I like that challenge, and it's something that I thought, we could redefine, we could bring something new, fresh ideas into the market. And I think that was how we got started. So that's where we are today. We've got 8 offices in the region, and 1 now in Middle East, so 9th one, and grown from a 2-man team to almost close to 100 people in the company.
Yeah. I mean, what you say is exactly right. It doesn't have to be a sunset industry. But I see like Apple project, you guys built the Apple project at the MBS. So like you guys are doing like not just behind the scenes kind of construction work, but things that are in front of our eyes as well.
Yeah, so a lot of the structures that we provide the steel for are very applicable and, structures that you see around. So, but we focus on something that's quite unique. We are in the waterfront and underground market.
Got it.
And therefore, we felt that was something that it was something that we were very good at and that we could value at. And I think that's where we brought that, the difference to the market and being very specialized and creating that niche for ourselves. And I think from there, our customers have that trust in us.
Okay.
And from there, we could grow.
Right. So besides being a more traditional industry, the steel business is also, like you say, quite competitive. And what I imagine to be, have thin margins, right? So imagine it to be very capital intensive as well. So can you share briefly some of these early challenges that you face in trying to establish Malayan, and how do you actually overcome them?
Traditional is an understatement. There are many companies out there in the market, even in our sector, in 2024, who don't even have a website till today.
Okay.
And they can still survive. So it's amazing how old school this market is. I would say that because we're in the steel industry, it is a commodity, and therefore we are in, playing with single-digit margins. So it's very, very capital intensive as well, and low margins. I think one of the greatest challenges when we started was, could we get the capital to finance a lot of this?
Yes.
And I think the local banks actually stepped up in our days. At the start, OCBC being one of them, came in with a lot of financing to support us to finance the projects. And some of our projects are not small in size. You're talking about, it could vary from a couple of $1 million to tens of millions of dollars. So it's not easy for a new startup to have that kind of capital to come in. Beyond that, I think also Enterprise Singapore was very helpful in terms of providing enterprise financing schemes, and grants to help our company take off as well. So I think all that kind of played its part in helping us to grow. I will also say that manpower was also a critical factor. You need people to run your business. You can't do this alone on your own. And I would say that finding people and hiring people was also a challenge that we faced.
Okay. And another thing like I always think about when I hear the steel industry is sustainability, actually, right? Because you need to be sustainable in especially the construction and projects kind of industry, right? So, and I've learned from your website again that you recently launched these two projects called Gold Listed and Gold Tag, which I understand are innovative solutions that track and verify the sustainability of your steel products, right? So, can you talk us through like what it really does? Because I know I kind of understand it from the names, but what does it really do? And what is it trying to solve?
We've been in the industry for coming to more than a decade, and and we were starting to see certain industry problems, and challenges that people were facing, and we thought that we took it upon ourselves, being one of the younger upstarts in the industry, that we said why can't we infuse technology to solve some of these problems? So that was how the idea of Gold Listed and Gold Tag came about. What's Gold Listed all about? Basically, when you use your steel material, a lot of people's idea of steel material is that it's being used permanently in the ground or in a building, right? And it will stay inside there for the rest of the lifespan.
Correct.
But unfortunately, not all steel works that way. There's about 30-40% of the steel material is actually used in a temporary manner, meaning that it goes into a building or it goes into a structure, and subsequently, once the project's finished, it's actually removed from the project. And what happens is that today, when a contractor buys my steel material, a couple of years down the road, when he completes the project, he pulls that off the ground. He doesn't know where to sell that material. Okay. So a lot of times he actually scraps that material. And what happens is that a lot of people would think that scrapping the material is actually good because you can reuse them, the steel again. But scrapping it means you have to put in much more energy to remelt it down and recreate steel again. And that creates a lot of carbon footprint.
Okay.
So we created Gold Listed as a platform whereby we can bring buyers and sellers of pre-owned steel material onto a marketplace, and we can connect them together and enable that facilitate that transaction to happen. So we aim to convince our customers to list their items on the website, at the same time give steel a second lease of life. So we do all the necessary, cleaning, cutting, logistics to facilitate that. And also, basically, we want to enable that steel to be reused multiple times. So what's the lifespan of that steel? We are talking about maybe 5 to 10 years that it could be reused. So instead of actually letting it go to scrap, we want to actually facilitate that reusability multiple times.
Okay.
So that's Gold Listed. And then for Gold Tag, how the Gold Tag come about was simply because whenever we produce our steel material, it's interesting that you only get a sticker on it. And you'll be surprised, for the last 20, 30 years, there's been no innovation other than just a plain sticker. And you will imagine that a sticker will fall off, right? Through shipment, through logistics, or even in storage, right? In Singapore, it rains and it shines, so you get rust, your sticker falls off. And once it falls off, you will be unable to tell what the material properties are, what's the heat number, when was it produced. So basically, like you lost your IC card, right? Your NRIC.
That's a big problem.
That's a big problem, right? So, and we thought that why hasn't anyone actually figured out a better way of doing so? So we created Gold Tag, which is an RFID application, the first of its kind RFID application, put it onto our steel material, and we'll be able to track and trace not just at the point of production, even in storage, and even if you drive it in the ground, you pull it up from the ground, you can still scan it and you can still get all the information. So that's what GoTag is all about. So we basically want to give our steel material a unique ID, like a NRIC number, if you want to put it that way, a unique ID so that you can track and trace it anytime.
So in today's business landscape, no business can afford to not have sustainability as part of their core mission anymore. Like Merlion has done, it's gone through GoListed, GoTagit, and I'm sure there are many more other solutions that you guys have as well. Can you explain like some of the difficulties in bringing this innovation into the market? Were there like some pushbacks from some of the buyers, and how it perhaps made Merlion stand out as a preferred partner also?
Creating some of these innovations look very simple from the outset.
Yeah,
you're like,
you explained it, right? The way you explain, like, to
a lot of people, it's just like a flick of the finger and it's done, right? But I must say that we thought so, and maybe naively we also thought that it would, we could just, maybe build a platform, build an RFID system, and what turns out was that we had to actually change the business model many times to adapt to what our customers were actually required. I think from a GoListed point of view, I think being able to meet the customer demands, what they actually were their pain points, I think that took a lot of reiteration and changes to the business idea. And how we're going to launch that across Southeast Asia was also going to be a big challenge because every market was different. Pre-owned steel material, the acceptability of pre-owned steel material was also different in every country. So that was a challenge. I think for GoTagit, just to create our final product, I think we had 40 or 50 different ideas, different iterations and prototypes before we finally got to our, launch of GoListed, GoTagit. So, I mean, I can't explain how much time. It took us about 2 years for each of these innovations. We were running them both concurrently from 2022 to 2023. We launched it last year in 2023 with DPM Gun being there to launch the innovation. But I would say that, there was a lot of thought process, and I would say that the industry also needed to understand and see that value in it. Yeah, and I think a lot of education was involved to get them to understand that.
Now that you mentioned that, I'm wondering two questions actually, right? One, you said there were a lot of like 20, 30, 40 iterations of the project. Like, were there any that you once it came in, you realized, we should have thought about that, And then secondly, like, were there any education programs required for your customers to accept these products? If it was a little bit more expensive, there could be some pushback already, right?
Yeah, I think price would always be the major pushback, right? I would say that whenever you bring a new innovation into the market, people need to accept it because number one, it brings value. Number two, it has to be at the right price point.
Yeah.
And I think any early adopter will realize that you always have to pay the price to be the early adopter. So I think a great amount of effort was done to try to compress that price down as much as possible. But I think we ourselves as a company, we wanted to show people that we will put our tax on our steel material, on all our steel material, if you buy our steel material. So we don't just provide the tax for, others, but also for ourselves as well, So it's both ways on our products, and also we offer it as a service. And I think it really requires a lot of customers education. We also went out to BCA, Building Construction Authority, get them to accept, that this is a viable solution. And I think with their support, and also with, MTI and the government support, I think that helps to get this out into the market. And also in terms of getting them to understand how to use the products as well.
Okay, sure. That's quite a good analogy. Like, once you get some regulatory support, at least, right, that starts the conversation then. But another thing I'm wondering, as you continue to grow and expand your operations, how do you identify partners with like-minded processes as you and share the same commitment to sustainability?
I believe the call for sustainability is inevitable. In today's world, 10 years ago, I would say that, if you talk about sustainability, people would say like, oh yeah, it's good to have.
Yeah.
Today, it's no longer a good to have, it's a must have.
Correct.
And I think it's important that we need to start teaming up with people, with the same like-minded approach. One such example was actually OCBC. OCBC actually introduced us to two entities, EcoVadis and also with Tembusu Consulting.
Okay.
So for EcoVadis, what's EcoVadis? They are a international ESG rating company. Basically, they benchmark you against your peers in terms of how sustainable you are as a whole company. And I think what OCBC did was, apart from just introducing us to their network of such partners, at the same time, they also encouraged us to start this journey. So what they did was they actually set targets for us and said, look, if you were able to hit such targets, we could give you some discounts on your loans. So with that kind of nudge from behind, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
For us, is it, anyway, we have to get on board this journey. And with that incentives in place, it just makes full sense.
Correct.
So with these sustainable linked loans, they set certain targets. And in fact, we are well ahead of the targets now, that we have set. So we are very happy that, we got on this journey, on this green journey.
Nice.
We are now a bronze, a rating on EcoVadis. And we also engage Tembusu Consulting basically to have a life cycle assessment on all our processes, on our products, and also a EPD, environmental, a declaration on our products as well. So that's the kind of partnership that we've been having. And I think it's very critical that, people like the banks can help us in that journey, help others, give them that little nudge that's necessary so that once you get on that journey, it's natural. You carry on,
Correct. I mean, like we began this podcast saying sustainability is not something people or businesses can ignore anyway.
Correct.
And if you're going to already do it, it's all the more great to have a financial incentive to do it as well.
Definitely. Yes.
Okay, so Merlion has grown tremendously. We've spoken about, your regional and kind of global operations already, expanding to the Middle East region, right? So in 2021, your revenue surpassed $100 million US dollars for the first time. You shared, that revenue was going to hit above the $230 million
Yes.
US dollar again this year, right? So it must be equally challenging and fascinating to navigate diverse markets. Many businesses start from Singapore, but then it's nice to see them grow across the region, brand Singapore. And like your brand is aptly called Merlion,
Yes.
a very uniquely Singaporean brand. Right. So I'm just wondering, back to the question again, how do you decide to expand into new regions? Were there thought processes to let's go into this market first? Even why into the Middle East before some of the other countries?
I would say that going overseas was something that was in our DNA from the get-go. We always knew that Singapore wasn't big enough a market for us, even though there's a lot of waterfront and underground. I mean, just look at the amount of MRTs that are being built, right? There's plenty of waterfront and underground, but I think people need to realize that beyond Singapore shores, there's an even greater market out there.
Yes.
Right? And that is untapped. And we need to be there to explore it. So from get-go, from day one, we have always looked at overseas market. Philippines was one of our first stops that we went to. Mm-hmm. And till today, it's still our biggest market. Why? Simply because they have a lot of infrastructure projects that suits exactly the kind of products that we handle.
The one thing I understand about Philippines, there are a lot of different islands, so they have a lot of waterfront then.
Correct. A lot of waterfront, a lot of ports being built, and a lot of rivers that needs to be upgraded. Because you get typhoons that come through, and we provide a lot of that steel material that goes into all this kind of river protection.
Again, I'm seeing a project that half of them are Philippines-based, the notable ones, right?
Yes, correct. So I mean, that's one of the reasons why we felt that we had to go overseas. And had we not gone overseas, we would never be the company that we are today.
Okay. So would you say the first market is almost the most important one to get right?
Not necessarily, but I think you need to be patient to figure out the right market that works for you. Okay. Philippines wasn't my biggest market right from the start, but I think we were there early and we built the necessary, setup and provided all the grounds for it to bear fruit subsequently. Okay. Today, I mean, we are the largest sheet pile distributor by volume, which is our core product across the entire Southeast Asia. We do 300,000 tons of this material, and it's because of our overseas market and not because of our Singapore market. Yeah. I think a lot of times how we move into a new market is, first of all, we need to see the potential. If you are in a waterfront and underground market, there must be waterfront and underground projects to begin with. So that's the first criteria.
Yes.
Second thing, we hire people locally. We tend to probably put 1 or 2 men on the ground, figure out what is the market, how competitive is our products in the market. Do we have the right to play in the market? Who are our competitors? I think that's really very important for any company to figure out. And I think once you can find a niche and you feel like, okay, we've got a good possible chance of being able to, survive and, supply in this market, then I think you need to start gaining market share. And I think once you start gaining market share, and I think the first few years in any market is always going to be challenging. That's why I said patience is important. Yeah. You have to pay some tuition fees to get to where you are. But one of the ideas that I've always shared with people was, don't go to a place whereby there's a lot of competitors.
Okay.
So don't go to a main capital market, because typically capital markets where there are, the capital of the country would have a lot of players there. You might want to consider even like a second tier city, because second tier city may have less competition, and you'll be able to gain ground much faster or understand the market. But once you start understanding the market, then you can apply, being local, start offering. But every year you learn new things. Every market is different. I'm in Malaysia, I'm in Indonesia, I'm in Thailand, I'm in Philippines. Each market operates differently. And you have to figure out what is the value that you bring to the customer and what problems can you solve for them. And I think once you can figure that out, then it's the same whether it's in Saudi Arabia that we are in or Africa that we are in.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great stamp of approval for Singapore businesses to go in the region, right?
Yes.
Okay, so talking about the regional expansion play again, did you find some markets easier to penetrate, easier to get into compared to other markets?
Yes and no. I think easier in the sense there are some countries whereby it's more transparent. It's easier to get set up.
Okay.
You can get things registered very quickly.
Like you have certain boxes, and once you then you can go in.
Yeah, then you can go in. But then typically these kind of markets would also be more competitive and more challenging because everybody also can get in.
Okay, so recently, Merlion entered into a partnership with Japan's Nippon Steel Trading. This is part of the Japan's Nippon Steel Corporation, which is the largest crude producer in Japan and the third in the world. So I think they took a minority strategic position in the company. I'm assuming deals like this don't happen by accident, and you have to do a lot to get them over the line. So the question really is, what does it take to land such a major deal and get it over the line?
So since 2020, our company has been growing exponentially. And you mentioned earlier at the start of the podcast that, we went from 100 million to 240 million over the last couple of years. And if you rewind 1 year, even before that, we went from actually 60 million all the way to like 240 million in a span of like 5 years, which is an extraordinary amount of growth. But that also put a huge strain on our finances. We were trying our best to finance a lot of these projects that were coming in, and we were getting a lot of traction in a lot of the markets that we were in. So we started looking around and said, what other options do we have in the market? Do we get more support or, investment from elsewhere? We talked to funds, we talked to like private equity, we talked to other funds. And what we found was that funds needed to come in and out within a span of say 5 years or to 10 years.
They have a fun life.
And they have a fun life. Yeah. And they don't have that liberty of sitting around and being with you for the long run.
Yeah.
And I think what we felt was that we wanted someone who was more strategic in that sense, who understands our business, who actually values what we bring to the market. So we've been distributing Nippon Steel products over the last, since 2016, so more close to 8 years now.
Okay.
And we were their downstream partners. And I think when the conversation started, there was good interest from both sides. They could see the synergy that we could bring to the table. At the same time, we had the downstream access, and we felt that there would be a good collaboration between the two. So we took about a year or so to negotiate and also to work through. But I think it was important because we understood what we wanted out of the deal. And I think, like you said, deals like this don't come every day. And I think we're very excited having a brand like Nippon behind us, Nippon Steel behind us, to propel us forward for the next lap of that growth.
Very cool. Okay, so working alongside some of the biggest names like Nippon Steel, what are some of the things that immediately changed for you guys? When you sign the deal, you realize this immediately opened some doors for us.
When we wanted to partner with Nippon Steel, I think one of the greatest draw was their global network that they already had. Right, like you said, they are one of the major players when it comes to steel material, and therefore, they were able to open doors for us to not just new markets, but also to Japanese contractors that they were already very familiar with, and of which, we were finding it difficult to access at times, So I think leveraging on their global network was one of the major things, and also going into many new markets. Just after the deal was announced in October, we are now planning to go into like places like Vietnam, Bangladesh, India, which they already had presence.
Okay.
And basically Nippon came to us and said, look, now that we are together, how can we help you, right, to move into all these areas? So I think that there is a lot that we could benefit from there. At the same time, I think we have a certain know-how in terms of running our business because we are very focused in a certain sector, like waterfront and underground. And we've got a certain way in which we have been customizing some of these steel solutions for our customers.
Right.
And I think that's where they could leverage also on our network, our know-how, and apply that to even places in Middle East, which they have no presence,
Right.
or Africa that we are now moving into as well. So I think that's where both ways there's a good amount of synergy.
Yeah, correct. I mean, like you mentioned, it always has to be win-win.
Win-win. Yes.
So, okay, on the flip side, right? I mean, there's a lot of positive things usually.
Yeah.
So on the flip side, right? While the aspirations for many, new companies or burgeoning startups may be to land some investment from the biggest players in the industry,
Yeah.
While this means you've arrived as a serious player, I'm just wondering, like, are there any drawbacks to it as well, right? What have your views changed from like the beginning days where you won these deals to today where, hey, I'm having these deals and it may or may not have cons as well. As with everything, I'm just trying to say,
Sure.
there are pros, there are cons. I'm just wondering what the cons are.
You should never start up a business with the idea that you're trying to exit or sell. If you were, don't do it. Always start a business with the idea that, look, I want to grow this, and this is something that I'm invested into, and it's something for the long run. Now, if along the way an opportunity presents itself that an investor or a good investor comes along the way with a good prospective offer, and I would say that yes, you can consider that, but never go with the idea that look, I'm going there because I want to build this over 3 years and then sell it away. Because that's not the way businesses should be run.
Right.
And I would
It
say
shouldn't be
that
seen as a shortcut in a way.
it's never a shortcut, right? And when you go with that idea and when you talk to any potential investors, at the back of your heart that with or without them, you can still survive. And that you don't, even if the deal falls through, I can still carry on and things will still continue to work out. And I think with that kind of mindset in place, you know exactly what you need and what you want.
Okay.
And I think for both parties, that alignment needs to be there for that success to work. Right. And I think, like in all partnerships, that long-term goal needs to be aligned. Is there any cons? I would say now it's still early, maybe too early to tell.
We just signed the deal.
Yeah, we just signed the deal. But I would say that we were very clear in terms of what we wanted in the long run. And I think what Nippon brought to the table was that they understood what we were driving at and they were there for the long run. So, I mean, we're happy with what we managed to achieve together, and we look forward to what there is in the future.
No, I think it like summarizes very nicely what people or business owners should look for in partnerships like that.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing. Right. So okay, as a co-founder, you've seen Merlion's growth, since the startup days, probably when you were much smaller, to now you're cross-border, regional, international player, right? How has your role at Merlion evolved over the years? Were there parts of the business that you had to let go during certain growth stages that you found exceptionally difficult?
I think for any founder, letting go things it's always going to be difficult. It's like your own baby. You build it from scratch. We started as a two-man team. We did everything ourselves. And till today, I think if you need me to still do any part of the business, I think we could still do it. But I think the role needs to evolve. And the role needs to change over time. I would say that as the company grew, my role also changed. I became more of an overseer of how the company runs strategically, instead of looking into very minute details on a lot of projects. Also, as our staff grew, it was more my role of ensuring that we help the leaders to create success for the rest of the teams. So I think that's more of the role that I play now, and ensuring that, we provide the coaching that's required, pass on that knowledge to people and let them run independently and be able to achieve those goals.
Right.
The part that I think hard to let go is, I think, when it comes to the sales sides of things, the joy of closing an order is always there. So sometimes I still follow my sales team out, at times, just to, get a feel of how the ground is, and there are still some old customers who love meeting up with, So I think a lot of people sometimes think that it's a lot of things that you have to look into, but I think generally you are the captain of the ship and you have to align everyone. So it's my duty to bring people back on course when I see them off course, and to call them out when there are issues,
Yeah. I mean, just like maybe you act as mentors to your employees, I'm wondering for yourself as well, do you rely or do you have a mentor that you can rely for some advice or to fast track some learning curve for yourself? How do you go about seeking guidance as the business leader of the company? Because there's no one like kind of above you. Like, where did you go?
I think that's where we have a management team, right? And I think I've always worked on a concept whereby, I would prefer my management team to have the equal amount of buy-in for any decisions that we make. And I think that team is responsible for calling me out when I, maybe have made a decision that have not gone well, And I think it's important as a leader to recognize that we are not perfect all the time. We do make mistakes. Sometimes we feel strongly on a certain matter, but when the facts don't, justify it, we have to change course, and we must be willing to admit and say, look, we made a mistake. Sorry, guys, let's rewind and let's change our course again. I think making mistakes is one thing. Not repeating the mistakes is the bigger lesson. That's the bigger lesson,
Okay.
Yeah, and I think along the way, we have learned, from our own mistakes and also witnessing what others have done and making sure that we don't make those mistakes.
Okay. So Merlion today has positioned itself as an innovator in the steel industry. We've talked about some of your solutions as well. So while the steel industry feels a traditional one, we can't ignore the fact that the digital revolution is all around us. We hear about AI, we hear about machine learning. So I'm just wondering, like within the steel industry, what are some of the exciting emerging technologies coming out?
When it comes to new technologies, we are in the waterfront space. One such way that we are observing in the future is that how can steel material be able to withstand corrosion? Because steel corrodes, it will rust, and it will weaken over time. And we are starting to see how can we develop better steel material in that area whereby you may not need to apply a paint coating or any kind of corrosion protection. And on itself, it still has the same, if not stronger, kind of capabilities, but yet being able to prevent itself from corroding. That's one area that I'm very excited about. I think that in the future, that's going to be a major part of what could change the market. But I think you talk about AI, and we are already using AI in a lot of circumstances.
Okay.
If you talk about AI, our Gold listed platform, we use AI to inspect the rust on our steel material. So using machine learning and visual imaging, we're able to tell this is a grade 1 rust or grade 5 rust. So we came up with our own rust grading method. At the same time, we're also using AI to, for example, to speed up our productivity. We can count the amount of, steel in one stack of, pile of material so that,
As opposed to what traditionally someone had to
correct. So just using an image, immediately you can plot out how many pieces are there. So AI is there for us to use. You see it on your phones, your iPads, everything else. But I think just like how the medical industry is using AI to create new drugs, I think AI can also be used in the same way to create new steel material. So I think there's the important. I mean, the possibilities are infinite. That you can use AI. And I think it's just how you tap into it. And as a company like ours, we have to get on that bandwagon to make full use and maximize what AI can do for us.
Okay, so I think having this conversation, there's one topic that we can't ignore, right? The government's plan for Long Island in 2050, right? Being in Singapore, I think my dad always tells me his view of the East Coast region has changed, and now it's my turn. When it comes to 2050, my view will totally change. And I think it's the government's way of like saying we need to protect our coastal waters. And it's quite relevant to Merlion because your project is on the coastal fronts, right? The water fronts. Right. So how are you preparing yourself to like meet some of these challenges, some of these environmental and coastal challenges, not just for Singapore, but in the region as well?
For us, we view coastal protection as something that's really very important and high on our agenda. I think the government has already announced their plans, and unfortunately your landscape will change in front of you, at least in your time and in your children's time, right? So Long Island will be there. We can't run away from it. But I think Merlion needs to be prepared for this. And I think our steel material currently right now is able to meet all the reclamation requirements of the Long Island and other future projects that will be coastal protection related, right? But we also understand from the government agencies, for example, PUB, which has been tasked to look into coastal protection, that they're also looking for beyond just the traditional ways of coastal protection. what they would naturally call hard structures, right? Steel material will be a hard structure. And they are looking for something that's maybe a soft structure or hybrid structure. And one such way is, of course, infusing nature and nature-based solutions into some of these new projects and coastal protection projects. One such area that Merlion is actually preparing itself is looking at infusing nature, right? And what we're doing is we're using things like corals, we're using things like oysters, in which it can actually reduce the wave action on some of the shorelines, and that could be applied around Singapore or even in places, for example, in Philippines or Indonesia that are also facing the same problems. So we are now rapidly prototyping and also doing a lot of trials in the market simply because we want to be prepared for what will happen in 2050. So, I mean, I'm just glad that, the government is already, working on this problem. And, I'm sure in 10 to 20 years' time, I think we should be very well prepared for the kind of sea level rise that we are expecting.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that also means, some of the businesses in Singapore, like yourselves, will be, the ones at the front of the queue.
Yes.
In terms of, being able to do some of these projects when the time comes.
Correct.
Right? Because the time will come. We know that water levels are going to rise. Okay, Eric, it's been a really wonderful time discussing your journey building Merlion, and all the innovations and sustainability projects that you have onboarded as well to quite a traditional industry like you've mentioned. Right, so I truly appreciate your openness, discussing some of the ups and downs, and even when it comes to, taking some of these investments from globally recognized names, right? In closing, I always like to ask the entrepreneurs that I speak to one final piece of advice, right? And, this is something quite close to what we've discussed, no business can afford to avoid sustainability. So what is your advice for new entrepreneurs trying to embrace sustainability as they also grow their business?
I think you have to get on board with sustainability. It's something that you can't run away from. But I think what's more important is that you need your people to be on board with you. I think a lot of times for us, sustainability cannot just be a word that you keep telling your staff. It has to be inbuilt into the culture and into and actions need to be there. So when we look at sustainability, we don't just look at it has to be green. We have to look at all different parts of it, the ESG aspect as well. You have to look at the social, the people, the governance as well. And I think for us as a company, my recommendation would be is let the actions speak louder than the words. Get your people involved in some of these projects that you are doing. For us, we get our people to do CSR work as well, and give back to the community. And I think all that, it's an important journey that your people and your staff will find purpose in that journey of sustainability.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you for wrapping that up so nicely for us. I think this is the perfect place to end as well. Thank you for sharing your insights again. And one final note to our sponsors for this season of the Building Series, OCBC.